FMCSA just dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the trucking industry overnight. Without warning, thousands of semi-trucks were suddenly ordered off the road, triggering panic across truck stops, dispatch offices, and logistics hubs nationwide. This wasn't a gradual rollout or a heads-up memo quietly circulated in advance. This was immediate. One day, drivers were hauling loads like normal. The next day, enforcement notices started hitting. Inspections ramped up, and rigs were being labeled out of service on the spot. Over 2,000 truck owners are already affected, and that number is climbing fast. The sheer speed and scale of this ban caught drivers, owner-operators, and even some fleet managers completely off guard. So what exactly was banned? FMCSA didn't outlaw trucking itself. Instead, it targeted a specific compliance failure that instantly made thousands of trucks illegal to operate. Vehicles that didn't meet the newly enforced standard were flagged as unsafe, regardless of their prior inspection history or accident record. Many of these trucks had been running for years, without issue, legally insured, properly registered, and actively hauling freight. Then suddenly, with enforcement flipped on full blast, those same trucks were no longer allowed to move an inch. The hardest hit by far are independent owner-operators. These are drivers who own one or two trucks, operate on razor-thin margins, and rely on constant movement to survive. When a large carrier loses a few trucks, they reshuffle loads, absorb losses, and keep moving. When a one-truck owner gets shut down, income drops to zero instantly. There's no backup truck, no spare driver, no corporate cushion. Small fleets are also feeling the pain, but mom-and-pop operators are getting crushed. Many woke up to enforcement notices that effectively shut down their entire livelihood overnight. The rule behind this crackdown isn't even new, which is what makes this so explosive. It's a regulation that's technically been on the books for years, quietly ignored or loosely enforced, often misunderstood or deprioritized during inspections. Drivers had gotten used to it being a paperwork issue at worst, a warning, a fix-it notice, maybe a delayed compliance deadline. But now, FMCSA flipped the switch. Enforcement went from passive to aggressive almost instantly. Inspectors were instructed to treat violations as immediate safety threats, triggering out-of-service orders on the spot. In a single sweep, more than 2,000 trucks were flagged as non-compliant. Inspections at weigh stations, roadside checks, and terminals identified the affected rigs within hours. Once flagged, those trucks weren't allowed to finish their loads, reposition, or even drive to a shop in some cases. Out of service doesn't mean a warning or a future deadline. It means the truck stops right now. Drivers were sidelined immediately, loads were abandoned or transferred, and schedules collapsed in real time. The financial damage is already brutal. Parked trucks don't earn money, but the bills don't stop. Many owner-operators are losing between $5,000 and $15,000 per week while sitting idle. Loads are being canceled, contracts are being terminated, and brokers are moving on to other carriers. Insurance companies are taking notice too. Non-compliance flags can trigger higher premiums or even policy cancellations. Truck loans don't pause just because enforcement changed, and early signs show loan defaults starting to rise among affected drivers. So can drivers fight back? In theory, there are appeals, waivers, and compliance pathways. In reality, it's complicated, expensive, and slow. Some fixes require equipment upgrades, documentation audits, or third-party certifications that can take weeks or months. Others require full overhauls that cost tens of thousands of dollars. For many small operators, the math simply doesn't work. By the time compliance is achieved, savings are gone, credit is damaged, and the business is already dead. That's why many owners may never return to the road. The ripple effects won't stop with truckers. Freight capacity is already shrinking, and when thousands of rigs disappear overnight, the system feels it immediately. Shippers are facing tighter availability, delayed pickups, and rising spot rates in certain regions. Retailers, manufacturers, and agricultural producers are all exposed. If this continues, prices could spike again, not because of demand, but because capacity vanished too fast to replace. So why did FMCSA do this now? Officially, it's about safety. Regulators point to rising accident statistics and compliance gaps, but many in the industry are questioning the timing. Election year enforcement patterns have a history of sudden crackdowns. There's also mounting pressure from insurers, regulators, and safety advocacy groups demanding tougher oversight. Whether this is truly about safety or about optics, The timing couldn't be worse for an industry already under strain, and this may only be the beginning. FMCSA insiders are signaling that this ban could be Phase 1. More inspections are coming. Enforcement categories may expand. Rules that have been technically enforced but practically ignored could suddenly become shutdown triggers. If that happens, thousands more trucks could be next. Truckers are already sounding the alarm. Online forums, social media groups, and industry chats are exploding with anger and fear. Drivers are calling this an extinction-level event for independent trucking. Petitions are circulating, protests are being discussed, and industry backlash is growing louder by the day. Many are saying the same thing. This isn't reform. This is a wipeout. And as the days go on, the fallout is only just beginning. Because every hour that passes, more drivers are discovering they're on the wrong side of this crackdown. Dispatch phones are lighting up with the same question over and over again. Why wasn't anyone warned? Many drivers say they would have complied months ago if enforcement had been clear, consistent, and transparent. Instead, they feel blindsided, punished not for reckless driving, but for a rule that sat dormant until it suddenly became a career-ending violation. At truck stops across the country, the mood has shifted from frustration to fear. Parked rigs line the lots, drivers sitting idle, watching loads move without them. Some are burning through their last savings just to keep insurance active while they try to figure out their next move. Others are already making the hardest calls of their lives, selling trucks at fire sale prices, walking away from years of hard work, or handing the keys back to lenders. This isn't just an enforcement action. For many, it's the collapse of a dream they spent decades building. What's making the situation even more volatile is the lack of clear guidance. FMCSA bulletins outline the rule, but on the ground, enforcement isn't always consistent. One driver gets flagged instantly, another passes inspection with a warning, and a third is told to wait for further clarification. That inconsistency is fueling anger and confusion, and it's creating an environment where no one knows who's safe and who's next. Large carriers are quietly adjusting behind the scenes. They're parking affected trucks, accelerating fleet upgrades, and shifting freight to compliant equipment. But even they aren't immune. Capacity gaps are widening, delivery windows are slipping, and operational costs are rising fast. Some carriers are already passing those costs downstream, which means shippers, and eventually consumers, are about to feel the impact. Meanwhile, brokers are scrambling. Loads are being reposted at higher rates, lanes are tightening, and reliability is suddenly more valuable than price. Smaller shippers, especially in rural and regional markets, are being hit the hardest. When capacity disappears overnight, the first places to suffer are the ones with fewer alternatives. Inside the industry, the political temperature is rising. Trade groups are demanding emergency meetings. Legal challenges are being discussed. Some are calling for a temporary enforcement pause, arguing that compliance should be phased in, not enforced with zero tolerance overnight. Others warn that if FMCSA doesn't adjust course, the independent trucking sector could shrink permanently. Drivers are also questioning what this means for the future of trucking itself. If long-standing rules can suddenly be weaponized without warning, what's stopping the next crackdown? What regulation will be rediscovered next? The uncertainty is pushing some younger drivers to reconsider entering the industry at all, while veterans are asking whether it's time to get out for good. And while FMCSA maintains that safety is the priority, critics argue that removing thousands of experienced drivers from the road may create new risks: fewer trucks, longer hours for remaining drivers, tighter schedules, and more pressure across the system. The unintended consequences could be just as dangerous as the problem regulators say they're trying to fix. As this ban continues to unfold, one thing is becoming painfully clear. This isn't a temporary disruption. It's a structural shock. The trucking landscape is changing in real time, and the people paying the highest price are the ones with the least protection. And as enforcement ramps up, inspections intensify, and compliance deadlines loom, the industry is bracing for what could be the biggest shakeup trucking has seen in decades. And the silence from Washington is only making the tension worse. Drivers are refreshing FMCSA updates daily, hoping for clarification, a grace period, or even a hint that enforcement might slow down. So far, that relief hasn't come. Instead, inspection activity continues, and every weigh station has become a potential shutdown point. For drivers still rolling, every mile feels like borrowed time. Behind the scenes, compliance shops and inspectors are overwhelmed. Repair facilities are backed up for weeks, paperwork audits are piling up, and third-party verifiers are charging premium rates because demand has exploded overnight. Even drivers who want to comply immediately are finding that the system simply can't handle the volume. That bottleneck alone is extending shutdowns far longer than anyone anticipated. Financial pressure is now spilling into personal lives. Truckers are missing mortgage payments, burning retirement savings, and pulling kids out of extracurricular activities just to cut costs. Spouses who once relied on steady freight income are now scrambling for temporary work. This isn't just an industry issue anymore. It's a household crisis unfolding in real time. The used truck market is already reacting. Prices on certain non-compliant rigs are dropping sharply as desperate owners try to unload equipment they can't legally operate. Meanwhile, compliant trucks are jumping in value, creating a two-tier market almost overnight. Lenders are watching closely, and some are tightening credit, which only makes it harder for small operators to upgrade and survive. What's especially dangerous is how fast trust is eroding. Drivers feel targeted rather than supported. Many say they've complied with every rule they were told mattered: logbooks, insurance, drug testing, inspections, only to be blindsided by a rule that suddenly became non-negotiable. That sense of betrayal is pushing some drivers to walk away from the industry entirely. Industry veterans warn that once independent capacity disappears, it rarely comes back. Large carriers fill the gap, prices rise, competition shrinks, and shippers lose flexibility. That may stabilize compliance numbers on paper, but it permanently changes the structure of the market, and not in a way that favors small business. The political implications are growing louder by the day. Lawmakers from freight-heavy states are starting to hear from constituents who can't move goods, can't find trucks, or can't afford rising transport costs. Pressure is building for hearings, oversight, and potential intervention. Whether that comes in time is the question. Right now, the industry is stuck in limbo. Drivers don't know whether to invest in fixes, wait for policy changes, or cut their losses and exit. Every decision feels risky, and every delay costs money. That uncertainty is just as damaging as the ban itself. And as enforcement continues and the ripple effects spread outward, from truck stops to warehouses to store shelves, one reality is becoming impossible to ignore. This FMCSA ban isn't just grounding trucks. It's redefining who gets to survive in modern trucking, who gets pushed out, and how much control small operators really have over their future as the clock keeps ticking and the next inspection looms just ahead. And with every passing day, the list of affected drivers keeps growing. What began as a few scattered enforcement actions has turned into a nationwide pattern. Word is spreading fast through dispatch channels and driver groups, but information is still fragmented. One driver hears one thing at a weigh station, another hears something completely different at a roadside stop hundreds of miles away. That inconsistency is turning fear into paralysis. Some drivers are now choosing to park voluntarily, even if they haven't been flagged yet. They're afraid that one inspection could end everything, so they're freezing operations preemptively. That decision alone is pulling even more capacity out of the market, accelerating the shockwaves rippling through the supply chain. Freight that once moved effortlessly is now stuck waiting for compliant equipment that may not exist in certain regions. Training schools and compliance consultants are suddenly in high demand, but that help comes at a steep cost. Courses, audits, and certifications that once cost a few $100s are now priced in the thousands. For drivers already bleeding cash, those fees feel impossible. Some are taking on high-interest loans just to stay in the game, gambling that they'll survive long enough to recover. Meanwhile, insurance companies are quietly rewriting the rules. Non-compliance flags are being logged, and risk profiles are being adjusted in real time. Drivers who manage to get back on the road may face premiums so high that profitability disappears anyway. It's not just about being legal, it's about being insurable, and that bar is rising fast. The human toll is becoming impossible to ignore. Veteran drivers with spotless safety records are being sidelined alongside genuinely unsafe operators, all swept up by the same enforcement net. Many are asking how removing experienced professionals from the road improves safety at all. That question has yet to receive a convincing answer. Inside FMCSA, officials insist the crackdown is necessary and long overdue. They argue that delayed enforcement allowed risks to accumulate and that decisive action was the only option. But critics counter that enforcement without transition is not regulation. It's punishment. And punishment, they warn, breeds resistance rather than compliance. Truck stops are turning into impromptu support centers. Drivers are sharing contacts, advice, and warnings. Some are organizing legal funds. Others are talking about coordinated slowdowns or rolling protests to force attention on the issue. The sense of unity is growing, but so is desperation. Shippers, watching from the sidelines, are starting to panic. Contracts written under assumptions of abundant capacity are suddenly unrealistic. Penalties for late delivery are being renegotiated, force majeure clauses are being invoked, and long-term planning is breaking down. When transportation becomes unstable, everything built on top of it starts to wobble. This moment could become a turning point for the entire industry. Either regulators adjust and create a path forward, or the trucking landscape permanently tilts toward consolidation, automation, and fewer independent voices. Once that shift happens, there's no rewind button. And as night falls in truck stops filled with silent parked rigs, one thought is echoing through the industry. If this can happen this fast, with this little warning, then nothing feels secure anymore, and every mile ahead feels heavier than the last as drivers wait to see what tomorrow's enforcement will bring. And tomorrow is exactly what no one can predict right now. Drivers are waking up every morning to a new reality where the rules haven't changed, but the consequences have. What used to be a routine inspection is now a potential business-ending event. That psychological weight is changing behavior across the industry, making every decision feel high risk and irreversible. Some drivers are trying to pivot fast. A few are switching lanes, literally and figuratively, moving into local hauling, farm exemptions, or short-term contracts that reduce inspection exposure. Others are looking outside trucking entirely, applying for warehouse jobs, equipment operator roles, or anything that offers stable income without regulatory roulette. For an industry already struggling with driver shortages, this quiet exodus could have long-term consequences. The technology gap is also being exposed. Larger carriers with compliance departments, real-time monitoring systems, and legal teams are navigating the crackdown far more smoothly. Independent drivers, relying on themselves to track regulations and enforcement trends, are being left behind. That imbalance is fueling accusations that the system is designed to favor consolidation, whether intentionally or not. Manufacturers and dealers are watching closely too. New truck orders may slow as uncertainty grows, while demand for specific compliant configurations surges. That mismatch could distort production plans and pricing, adding yet another layer of volatility to an already fragile market. Even equipment suppliers are bracing for uneven demand spikes. Public attention is slowly starting to catch up. Social media videos from stranded drivers, parked convoys, and empty trailers are gaining traction. Comment sections are filling with disbelief as viewers realize how quickly essential infrastructure can be disrupted. The more visible the impact becomes, the harder it will be for policymakers to ignore. Still, time is the enemy for most truckers. Every day offline compounds losses, erodes credit, and closes doors. Even if relief comes later, it may come too late for thousands who simply can't survive the gap. That's the part many fear regulators are underestimating. Recovery isn't automatic once enforcement eases. Industry analysts are now warning that the aftershocks could last years. Fewer independent operators means less competition, higher freight rates, and increased vulnerability to future disruptions. What looks like a safety action today could reshape freight economics for a generation. Yet despite everything, drivers aren't giving up quietly. They're documenting every inspection, every shutdown, every inconsistency. They're sharing information faster than ever, building networks out of necessity. In a strange way, the pressure is forging a new kind of solidarity. And as the crackdown continues, one unresolved question hangs over the entire industry. Is this the peak of enforcement, or just the beginning? Because if this is only phase 1, then the real storm hasn't even arrived yet, and the road ahead remains uncertain, heavy, and still unfolding. And that uncertainty is now bleeding into every corner of the freight ecosystem. Warehouses are adjusting staffing levels because trucks aren't arriving on schedule. Production lines are slowing as raw materials sit delayed. Retailers are quietly revising delivery promises, bracing for complaints they know are coming. When trucking stumbles, nothing downstream escapes untouched. Drivers who are still rolling are being pushed harder than ever. With capacity shrinking, dispatchers are stacking loads back to back, reducing flexibility and increasing fatigue. Ironically, a crackdown meant to improve safety may be increasing pressure on the remaining drivers to run tighter schedules, longer days, and fewer breaks. That contradiction isn't lost on the people behind the wheel. Meanwhile, rumors are spreading faster than facts. Some say enforcement will ease within weeks. Others claim more categories are about to be added. The lack of official communication has created a vacuum, and that vacuum is being filled with speculation. For drivers making life-altering decisions, that fog of uncertainty is just as damaging as the ban itself. Fleet managers are quietly reassessing their exposure. Even compliant carriers are asking whether other dormant rules could suddenly be activated. Compliance audits are becoming more aggressive internally, not because rules changed, but because enforcement attitudes clearly have. The message is clear. Nothing can be assumed safe anymore. In trucking communities, the tone has shifted from anger to grim calculation. Drivers are running the numbers over and over, trying to decide whether to fight, comply, or exit. There are no easy answers. Every path forward carries risk, and every delay reduces options. The emotional toll is deepening. For many drivers, trucking isn't just a job. It's identity, independence, and pride. Being forced off the road without warning feels personal. That loss of dignity is fueling resentment that won't fade quickly, even if policies change. Some industry veterans are comparing this moment to past shakeups that permanently altered trucking: deregulation, electronic logs, insurance overhauls. But they warn this one is different because of its speed. Change this fast doesn't allow adaptation. It forces attrition. And attrition is exactly what many fear regulators are willing to accept. Fewer trucks, fewer drivers, fewer voices. Easier to regulate, easier to control. Whether that outcome is intentional or incidental, the effect is the same for those being pushed out. As night after night passes with more rigs parked than moving, the question no one can escape is how much longer this can continue before something breaks, politically, economically, or socially. Because an industry built on constant motion cannot survive in a state of forced stillness forever, and the longer this ban remains in full force, the closer trucking moves to a breaking point that no one seems prepared for.